You embarrassed this company in front of $1 million client. We can't afford that again. You're done here.
Her words echoed in my ears long after I left the room final, sharp and heavy like a slammed door I hadn't seen coming. They gave me the biggest pitch of the year, and I had exactly 5 days to make it perfect. When I stepped out of the conference room, my shoes clicking softly against the polished tile floor, the entire office buzz seemed to pause. A few heads turned, some out of curiosity, some with thinly veiled surprise, and others with that half-pitying, half-predatory look I'd come to recognize all too well over the years. 42. That's how old I was. Too young for retirement, too seasoned to be trendy, just enough experience to be respected, and quietly sidelined. At Brandspire, the culture shifted faster than client budgets. One day you were the golden girl. The next you were just another relic in a world obsessed with algorithms and viral impressions. I passed the break room, where the younger associates clustered around nitro cold brew and almond milk lattes, talking animatedly about TikTok trends and some edgy new brand voice for a deodorant client. I nodded at a few of them. They smiled politely, but that didn't make room. At my desk, clean, classic, tucked near the window, I sank into my chair and stared at the folder I'd been handed. The Grand Line account, a national chain with legacy problems and high potential. We'd been trying to land them for 9 months, ever since their previous agency flopped during a Super Bowl ad campaign. Mr. Klein, our department head, had said I was the safe bet. I knew that was code for boring but reliable. I didn't mind. I'd rather be steady than flashy, especially when millions were on the line. But being safe in this office meant being disposable if things went wrong. Big win. Huh, a voice said behind me. I turned to see Talia Knox leaning casually against the side of my cubicle. Her red lipstick was impeccable, her blazer sharp, and her confidence nuclear. Congrats, she added. Grand Line is huge. Thanks, I replied, my voice even. It's a big one. You want help with the visuals? She offered. I've got time this weekend. I raised an eyebrow. Talia never had time, not unless there was something in it for her. I appreciate it, I said, but I've already sketched out the storyboard. Just need to refine the data points. She shrugged. Cool, just offering. I watched her walk away, long legs purposeful, ponytail swinging. She always looked like she was walking into a commercial for herself. I turned back to my monitor and opened a fresh slide deck. No templates, no gimmicks, just a white screen, and the pressure to fill it with clarity and conviction. Grand Line didn't want trend-chasing nonsense. They wanted a partner who could understand their roots and show them how to evolve without alienating their core customers. I knew their pain points: shrinking in-store sales, chaotic digital presence, a branding identity stuck in the early 2000s. I had 5 days to help them see themselves, not as a dying brand, but as a legacy worth reviving. By Wednesday, my desk was buried in printouts. I had heat maps, consumer trend graphs, brand archetype breakdowns. I skipped lunches, ignored social invites, and spent evenings watching old Grand Line ads on YouTube. Every night, I backed up my files onto a password-protected USB just in case. I labeled the drive GS Deck Full and kept it tucked under my notepad. It wasn't paranoia, it was routine, or at least, it used to be. Friday afternoon came too quickly. The pitch was scheduled for Monday morning, and I still hadn't finalized the last 2 sections. I stayed after hours. The rest of the team filtered out by 6:00 p.m, leaving the office humming and quiet. By 15, the only other person left was the janitor humming along to a soft jazz playlist. I rubbed my temples, saved the final edits, and copied everything to the USB. I stood and stretched, exhaustion flooding my bones. Then I made the mistake. I left the USB plugged in. I told myself I'd be back early Monday to rehearse anyway. No one would touch it. I'd worked in this company for 17 years. We weren't the kind of place where people stole work. Right. I grabbed my coat and scarf, making my way towards the elevators. As I passed the bullpen, I noticed a desk still lit. Talia. She was at her computer, typing fast, a half-eaten salad pushed to the side. You're still here? I asked, stopping briefly. She glanced up, smiled like I'd caught her doing something wholesome. Just wrapping up some client follow-ups. You, finishing Grand Line, I said. Nice. You're going to crush it, she replied smoothly. I forced a nod. Thanks. You too have a good weekend. I rode the elevator down alone. The lobby was empty. Outside, the Chicago air was crisp, sharp with late autumn chill. I pulled my scarf tighter and headed toward the train. Saturday was a blur of coffee, rehearse, revise, repeat, and whispered run-throughs in front of the bathroom mirror. I knew the transitions by heart. I'd timed every beat to the second. Sunday, I made one last dry run at the kitchen table, then collapsed on the couch beside my cat. Waffles. At 9:53 p.m, Just as I was shutting my laptop, a Slack message pinged. Talia Knox. Hey Avery, mind sending the latest version again? Want to prep for any Q&A Mr. Klein might throw our way? My stomach sank. The message was friendly. Too friendly. I hadn't sent her anything. Not since Tuesday. I hovered over the keyboard. Something felt off, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I typed, sure, sending now. But I didn't send the real file. I sent the Monday draft. The one missing the final analytics. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I should have known the pitch wasn't the only thing being edited that night. The client walked out halfway through my pitch and I couldn't breathe. The conference room was dead silent for a few unbearable seconds after the door closed behind Mr. Langston. I stood there, remote in hand, blinking at the screen like it had betrayed me. Because, in a way, it had. The slides were wrong. They weren't catastrophically off, but the storyline was broken, the flow rearranged, and the final section, which I'd spent 3 nights refining, was missing entirely. In its place, a clunky slide packed with buzzwords and stock images that I never selected. I had rehearsed that presentation in my sleep. What showed up on screen wasn't mine. The Grand Line team had exchanged awkward glances through the entire first half. When the third slide in a row opened with a conflicting message, their lead strategist whispered something to Mir Langston. The next thing I knew, they were gathering their folders and nodding stiffly. This was not what we expected. Mr. Langston had said, politely, but coldly, we'll be in touch. They weren't going to be. I stood frozen, heat rising from my neck to my ears. My palms were clammy, my stomach hollow. From the corner of my eye, I saw Talia shift in her chair, crossing her legs, adjusting her blazer like she was a guest, not a co-creator of the disaster. Are you okay? She asked softly after the room emptied. I turned slowly to look at her. Her eyes were wide with feigned concern, the kind that people use when they've already rehearsed their part in your downfall. That wasn't the file I finalized, I said quietly, voice tight. Talia tilted her head. Really? I thought it was. That's what you sent me last night. Right. No, I hadn't sent her anything close to that. The version I gave her had been incomplete on purpose. But this was something else. This was a Frankenstein creation of mismatched content and garish marketing fluff. Someone had altered the final file. Before I could respond, Mr. Klein walked in, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation. What happened? He asked. I'm not sure. I started. The deck was modified. Modified. He frowned. By whom? I hesitated. The truth was, I didn't know for certain yet. I suspected. My gut screamed. But suspicions weren't proof, and I wasn't about to accuse someone in front of my superior without it. There are discrepancies, I said. I'll look into it. Klein sighed and rubbed his forehead. Avery, we put a lot on the line here. I understand. Talia interjected. It's possible the wrong file got uploaded. These things happen. Maybe we can salvage this. Klein looked at her, then back at me, but he didn't ask for more. He just muttered something about setting up damage control and walked out. I stood there alone for a long moment, staring at the black screen. When I got back to my desk, the office had fallen into the usual Monday lull. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and someone was laughing too loudly near the coffee station. I sat down and opened my project folder. The version on the shared drive matched what I saw in the room. Someone had overwritten my original file. There were no error logs, no backup saves, nothing I could use as immediate proof, but I knew. At lunch, Talia passed by my table in the break room and paused. She held her salad in one hand, her phone in the other. You really had everyone nervous in there, she said lightly. But you pulled through. Mostly. I didn't reply. She leaned in. Maybe next time. Double-check your uploads. Just to be safe. And there it was, the glint beneath the smile. A flash of something triumphant, but still deniable, still slippery. After she left, I sat there with my tuna sandwich untouched. I stared at the wrapper like it held answers. It didn't, but my instincts were louder than ever. I knew what had happened. I just didn't know how yet. By the end of the day, word had already spread. Rough pitch, someone whispered in the hallway. That wasn't like her. A few coworkers patted my arm or offered sympathetic smiles, but the warmth was gone. The air had shifted. I was no longer the senior strategist who always delivered. I was the one who'd choked. Mr. Klein didn't say anything when he passed my desk. He just gave a tight nod and walked on. I packed up slowly, carefully unplugging the USB this time. The real one, the one I had stupidly left behind Friday night. I checked its contents, no tampering, which meant the switch happened on the shared system. I copied everything to a private folder on my personal drive. Then I shut the lid of my laptop and sat back, hands clasped tightly. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to quit. If they thought I would cry and quit, they didn't know who they were dealing with. I didn't say a word. I just started watching everything and everyone. In the aftermath of failure, people rarely know how to treat you. Some try too hard to be kind, others disappear into awkward silence. But most pretend they're too busy to notice anything at all. At Brandspire, silence was the sharpest form of judgment. I walked into the office on Tuesday morning 15 minutes earlier than usual, not because I had anything urgent, but because I couldn't sleep. My apartment had been quiet, too quiet. Even Waffles, my aging tabby cat, had sensed the tension and curled beside me the entire night, as if keeping watch. I appreciated it more than I cared to admit. The office lights flickered on in slow succession as I walked through the main floor. The glass walls of the conference rooms reflected a ghostly version of me, tired eyes, hair pulled back too tightly, lips pressed in a firm line. I nodded to my reflection like it was an opponent I had to face. My desk, thankfully, was untouched, but taped to the side of my monitor was a small post-it note. Keep pushing. Avery, you've still got it. No signature, no handwriting I recognized. Could have been sincere, could have been sarcasm. These days, it was hard to tell. I peeled it off and slipped it into my notebook without a word. I didn't open the Grand Line file. I didn't need to relive the disaster. Instead, I opened a different program, one reserved mostly for IT staff. The company's internal file history tracker wasn't something many people knew how to use properly, but I'd spent almost 2 decades here. I knew every creaky corner, every ignored software tool buried behind the daily workflow. I pulled up the metadata from Sunday night and scrolled through the logs. The system didn't lie. There it was, my file, accessed at 10:42 p. May, not by me, not from my home IP, logged into my user profile. Yes, but from inside the office network. Someone had opened the pitch file and overwritten it from within my own session. And I had left my workstation unlocked on Friday night. A rookie mistake. I stared at the screen, my coffee untouched and cooling rapidly. Someone had used my account. That narrowed it down, but it wasn't proof yet. I began documenting everything. Screenshots of login activity, version history, a timestamp comparison between the file I finalized and the one that was presented. But I needed more. Something solid. A witness, maybe, or at least another breadcrumb. Around 10:15 Mainsa, I heard footsteps approaching, not heels rubber soles, soft and uncertain. I looked up. Justin Bray, the intern. He was clutching a worn notebook to his chest and avoiding eye contact like a teenager caught skipping class. He gave me a polite nod as he passed, then hesitated. "Hey," I said gently, just enough to stop him. He turned, startled. "Hi, Miss Sloan." I gestured toward the empty seat across from mine. "Got a minute?" He glanced around as if looking for permission, then sat down. "I'm not going to put you in a difficult position," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I just want to ask if you noticed anything strange last Friday evening, after most people had left." He bit his lip. "Actually, yeah, I stayed late. Was printing mock-ups for the Fitzgerald account." His voice dropped a little. "I saw Talia. She was at your desk. That made my pulse jump. She wasn't just passing by." I asked. Justin shook his head. "No, she was sitting in your chair. Your monitor was on. I thought maybe you had asked her to help with something." "I hadn't," I said quietly. He hesitated again. "She didn't see me. I was behind the divider. I just remember thinking it was weird because she looked nervous, kept checking the hallway." I leaned forward. "Did you notice what time it was?" "Close to 10:30, maybe a bit after. I was heading out when I saw her. Didn't think much of it until, well, Monday." My hands tightened around my coffee cup. "I know this might sound strange, Justin, but did you happen to record anything? Or maybe take a picture?" He looked almost ashamed as he pulled out his phone. "I didn't mean to spy, but I did screenshot the printer logs for my files, and I think her login timestamp showed up by accident. I still have it." He scrolled and handed me the screen. There it was. User, Asloan, time, 10:42 p. May, device, desktop 15 RCH Brandspire network, IP, internal VPN, access. My breath caught. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. I looked up. "Thank you, Justin. Seriously." He shrugged, almost embarrassed. I wasn't sure what to do. Didn't want to get involved. "You didn't get involved," I said. "You just told the truth. That's all." He stood to leave, but paused. "Will this go to HR?" I nodded. "It has to." After he left, I sat in silence for several long minutes. I could hear the office coming to life around me, phones ringing, the distant hum of conversation, the coffee machine sputtering like it did every morning. Life continued. But for me, something had changed. I compiled everything: screenshots, logs, version comparisons, Justin's image file. I saved it all to a private folder and encrypted the backup. And then I waited. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't making noise. It's staying silent until everyone else starts talking. At 3:47 p.m, a calendar invite popped up on my screen. Mandatory review, HR conference room, Wednesday, 10:00 a.m. No sender, no agenda, just a time, a place, and a familiar chill settling over my skin. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I clicked accept. Talia walked into the HR conference room smiling until she saw who was already seated. I was already there when she pushed open the frosted glass door, her heels clicking against the polished floor, like the entrance cue of a performance she'd been rehearsing. She wore a fitted grey suit that looked expensive, her makeup flawless, her expression rehearsed and radiant until her eyes met mine. Her smile faltered, just for a second, barely noticeable to anyone else, but I saw it. She hadn't expected me here. The room was stark, like all HR conference rooms. Neutral walls, a long oval table, and a clock ticking too loudly. Linda O'Hara, our HR manager, sat at the head of the table. She was in her late 50s, calm and unflinching, the kind of woman who didn't waste words or time. Across from her was Justin Bray, fidgeting with his phone and clearly uncomfortable. When Talia walked in, his eyes dropped to the table immediately. Linda motioned to the chair across from me. "Have a seat, Talia." Talia slid into the chair slowly, carefully schooling her face into mild confusion. "I wasn't sure what this was about," she said brightly, "but I assume it's about the Grand Line presentation. I was hoping to talk to you about that too." Linda didn't respond right away. Instead, she folded her hands, looked directly at Talia, then at me. "I've asked you both here," she said, "because a discrepancy was discovered in the file that was presented during Monday's pitch." Talia's tone shifted, still smooth, but defensive. "Yes, I noticed that too. I tried to help Avery correct it, but by then the meeting had already gone off track." I said nothing. "I didn't have to." Linda nodded once, as if giving her the rope she needed. "You tried to help." "Yes," Talia said, tilting her head slightly. "She sent me the file on Sunday night. I assumed it was final, but when I opened it Monday morning, I saw it was missing some things. I thought maybe there was a version control issue." Linda turned toward Justin. "Justin, could you walk us through what you showed me this morning?" Justin's hand trembled slightly as he picked up a printout. He cleared his throat. "I was in the office Friday night, late, around 10:30. I saw Talia sitting at Mrs. Sloane's desk. Her screen was on. It was Avery's user account." Talia's face froze. "I think there's a mistake," Justin continued, now reading more clearly. "Here's the access log. The file was opened from Avery's login, but from an internal IP address inside the office, not her home network. The timestamp is 10:42 p.m. Friday. Avery had already gone home. I confirmed that. Linda laid another sheet on the table. We cross-referenced the VPN logs. You, Talia, logged in from the Chicago office at that exact time, using Avery's machine. Without her permission, Talia opened her mouth, then shut it. For a moment, the room was completely silent. I thought I could help clean it up," she said finally, but the tone was unraveling. "It was late, and I thought maybe Avery forgot something. I didn't change anything major." Linda's gaze sharpened. "So you admit you accessed her account?" Talia flinched. "It wasn't intentional. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have opened the file, but it was for the team. I was trying to salvage the situation." "Before the meeting?" Linda asked. "Or 2 days before the meeting, when no one had seen the final version." Talia didn't answer. The walls felt like they were closing in. Not on me, but on her. I sat motionless, hands folded neatly in my lap, eyes locked on a small crack in the edge of the conference table. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Every word coming from Linda and Justin was louder than anything I could have said. "Due to this breach of professional conduct," Linda said after a pause, "you are suspended effective immediately, pending internal review and a formal disciplinary hearing." Talia shot to her feet, her voice sharp. "You're suspending me?" Over her word, Justin looked up then, eyes steady. "Not just her word. Mine too. And the system logs." Talia turned to me, disbelief cracking through her polished exterior. "You're choosing her over me." Linda didn't blink. "No, we're choosing the truth." For a moment, Talia stood there as if expecting anyone to defend her. No one did. The silence was deafening. She stormed out, her heels no longer clicking but thudding, like fists on marble. Linda turned to me, her tone softening. "Thank you for your patience through all this. Avery, I know it hasn't been easy." I nodded once, still not trusting myself to speak. Justin let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "You both may go," Linda said, gathering the documents. "Avery, I'd like to speak with you again later this week." Privately, outside the conference room, the air felt crisper, lighter. The noise of the office hummed as usual, oblivious to what had just shifted beneath its foundation. I walked back to my desk. People glanced up. Some looked away. Some didn't look at all. It didn't matter, because for the first time in a long while, I felt something return to me, quiet, steady, and hard-earned. My dignity. No one apologized to me, but they started holding the door open again. Respect, it turns out, doesn't arrive with a parade. It trickles in through held glances, slightly longer good mornings, and the subtle shift of shoulders making room at the coffee machine. It arrives when people remember you still exist, and maybe, just maybe, they were wrong to forget. By Monday morning, word had spread. Talia was gone, well on leave, per the HR bulletin, but everyone knew what that meant. Her desk, once a shrine to curated perfection, now sat empty. The only trace of her presence was a faint shimmer of glitter from her old mousepad. Still catching the light, I walked in early, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I missed the quiet before the noise, the hum of the building waking up, the sunlight stretching across the carpet, the sound of the first pot of coffee brewing behind the break room wall. It reminded me of before all of it. I sat at my desk and opened my inbox. Among the usual clutter of project updates and CC'd chaos, one subject line stood out. Request, strategic feedback, client direction. It was from Linda. "We'd like your insight on our senior accounts going into Q1. 9:00 a.m. Friday, conference room 4B. Informal discussion. Small group. You've earned your place there. LO. I stared at it for a while. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a company-wide announcement, but it was something else. Trust. That afternoon, Becca, the junior strategist, who once sat through my meetings looking half distracted, stopped by with 2 coffees in hand. "I wasn't sure how you take it," she said, offering one. I guessed black with a splash of oat milk. She was right. "Thank you," I said. She shifted awkwardly. "Look, I feel like I owe you an apology." "You don't," I said. "You just watched everyone else. That's not the same as pushing someone down." She exhaled in relief. "Still, you're kind to share your insights last quarter, and I didn't listen. But I'm listening now." Later, at lunch, I caught Justin in the break room reading a thick industry report with a highlighter. He looked up and grinned sheepishly. "Linda said I might be looped into the Q1 legacy campaign. She said I have integrity potential." Whatever that means. It means they're finally paying attention to the right things, I said, and he beamed like someone had handed him an award. That entire week, I watched the unspoken language of the office shift. Colleagues who once looked through me now paused in the hallway, not always to talk, but to nod, to acknowledge. It was subtle, but it mattered. One afternoon, Mr. Klein passed my desk with a memo in hand. He didn't stop, but he did say, "I've recommended your pitch structure to the expansion team." No eye contact. No smile, but I heard it. A week ago, I was an embarrassment. Now, my framework was an example. It was Thursday evening when I stayed late, not out of obligation, but out of rhythm. I liked seeing the place empty, chairs tucked in, monitors dark. It reminded me how much of my career I had spent in those hours creating, revising, anchoring campaigns before the day crews arrived. The printer clattered to life behind me, and I turned to see the facilities manager, with a handful of engraved nameplates. He smiled politely. "Just swapping titles before the Q1 seating shuffle," he said, gesturing to the closed door of conference room 4B. Curious, I followed his path with my eyes as he slid the nameplate into place. Avery Sloan, Senior Client Strategist, Advisory Panel. My breath caught, not for what it meant to others, but for what it meant to me. There was no ribbon cutting, no glass of champagne. Just my name, quietly returned to the space I had already earned, a space they'd once questioned if I still deserved. I returned to my desk, shut down my computer, and pulled on my coat. As I stepped into the hallway, someone ahead of me held the elevator door without turning around. A small gesture, but a loud one. I didn't win a trophy. I didn't get a standing ovation. I got my name back on the door, and that was enough. I was never loud, never flashy, but I was always watching. Friday morning arrived grey and quiet, the kind of Chicago day that crept in like a whisper rather than a storm. The wind had softened, and the sidewalks were glazed with a faint shimmer of frost. Thanksgiving was just days away, and you could feel it in the air. people a little softer, their voices a little lower, as if trying not to disturb the calm before the long weekend. I arrived early again. Old habit now. I liked the stillness before the world filled in. Liked hearing the hum of the heating vents, the gentle creak of elevator doors, the silence before coffee cups started clinking together. Conference room 4B was already lit when I walked in. Linda was setting down a box of bagels on the side table. There were only 5 chairs arranged in a circle this time, not the usual row facing a screen, no projector, no agenda printed out, just legal pads, a few pens, and a whiteboard with the words Q1, Integrity and Strategy. It wasn't a title, it was a challenge. Linda greeted me with a simple nod, as she always did. Glad you're here early. Old habits, I said. Soon, the others arrived, 3 senior team leads from different departments, and 1 outside consultant from a firm we were quietly exploring. Each brought something to the table: analytics, branding, operations, but as the conversation began, I realized none of them were looking for someone to dominate the room. They were listening. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't posture or hedge. I shared what I'd learned, not just from the Grand Line ordeal, but from 17 years of sitting across from clients who didn't need charm, but confidence. Not flash, but follow through. They're not buying polish, I said, my voice steady. They're buying belief that we'll be there when their markets shift, that we'll admit when we're wrong, and still show up the next day with a solution. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to dazzle them. I simply told the truth. Linda smiled, not with approval, but with recognition. Let's anchor that. Build from there. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't defending my relevance. I was defining it. After the meeting, I lingered in the hallway near the HR board where birthdays and work anniversaries were posted. It had been 2 years since my name was last on that corkboard. I had stopped checking after a while, but there it was, pinned beneath December, a white note card with simple handwriting. Avery. For showing us quiet doesn't mean weak. Happy early birthday. I stared at it for longer than I should have, not because it was public praise. It wasn't. No one else was watching. But because it was the first time I'd seen my name pinned to something that didn't involve accountability or correction. Later that afternoon, I stepped out of the office to walk to the bookstore 2 blocks away. It had been my personal tradition for years, buying a book before every Thanksgiving. Something fiction, something gentle, something no one else would ever see me read. I chose a novel about a lighthouse keeper in Maine. A woman who worked alone in storms, guiding others safely to shore, never seen but always essential. As I walked back, I passed the same cafe I had once eaten lunch at every week back when I had lunch partners. I stopped at the window and saw my reflection. Same coat, same face, but something different in the way I stood. Inside, Becca waved at me from a small table near the back. She held up a to-go bag. Pumpkin loaf, she mouthed through the glass. Want to split it again? I walked in, sat down, and for half an hour we talked about nothing important, just the weather, her niece's spelling bee, a new yoga class. For the first time in a long while, I laughed freely, without looking over my shoulder. When I got back to my desk, my inbox had 1 new message flagged as urgent. It was from the Grand Line team. We've reviewed your original pitch file, the one you actually built. We sincerely apologize for misjudging the presentation. Your vision was exactly what we needed. It was signed by Mr. Langston himself. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit reply. Thank you for taking the time to revisit the work. Let me know how we can support your team moving forward. No spite, no sarcasm, just clarity. I shut down my computer and slid the novel into my bag. As I zipped it closed, I felt the weight of something return, not heaviness, but balance, as if the air had finally shifted and let me back into my own space. In the elevator lobby, I stood waiting next to a new intern. He looked nervous, checking his phone twice in a minute. When the elevator arrived, I stepped back and gestured for him to go first. He nodded, and as he stepped in, he turned and said, "People talk about you around here. They say you're the one who didn't flinch." I smiled. Sometimes not flinching is the most powerful thing you can do. He grinned. Cool. As the elevator doors closed, I stood alone in the stillness. Then I walked out of the building into the late afternoon light. Chicago had begun to sparkle holiday lights wrapped around trees, shop windows glowing warm with garland and candles. I took the long way home, letting the cold air sting just enough to feel alive. Let them think you've lost. That's when the truth walks in and sits down beside you. Some people chase attention, others carry trust, and trust always arrives. Even if it's a little late, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to keep standing when others expect you to fall. Avery didn't rewrite her story with revenge or rage. She rewrote it with precision, stillness, and an unshakable sense of who she was. While others chased applause, she carried something rarer, credibility, And in the end, when the noise faded and the titles shuffled, it was her presence people trusted again. Let them overlook you, let them doubt, but never hand them the pen. The lesson: power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply doesn't leave the room.